The reinvention of Pepsi when new ownership finally took over Pepsi, the brand was practically on life support. No credibility, no prestige, barely any customers left. But sometimes it's exactly in those desperate situations that bold moves are born. The new leaders didn't just want to save Pepsi, they wanted to reinvent it. They looked at the broken pieces Caleb had left behind and saw something others had missed: potential. And you won't believe this, their gamble would flip the entire soft drink market upside down. The reinvention wasn't about fancy labs or secret formulas. It was about price at a time when Coca-Cola dominated with strong branding and consistency. Pepsi needed a different weapon. The shocking story is that they decided to launch a campaign unheard of in the industry: 2 bottles of Pepsi for the price of 1. Suddenly, Pepsi wasn't just a soda, it was a deal too good to ignore. Working-class families, struggling to stretch every dollar during the Depression, couldn't resist. What really happened is that Pepsi turned scarcity into opportunity. While others sold luxury, Pepsi sold value. This wasn't just clever marketing, it was empathy. They understood the pain of ordinary Americans during tough times and positioned Pepsi as their drink. The truth revealed is that great businesses don't just sell products, they align with the struggles of the people they serve. And if you're building your own dream, learn from this mistake. Don't ignore what your audience is really fighting. Through sales exploded, the campaign made Pepsi accessible in ways Coke wasn't willing to match. No one saw it coming, but Pepsi went from failed brand to people's brand. Its bottles filled kitchen tables, lunch breaks, and celebrations across working-class America. Pepsi was no longer the underdog gasping for survival. It was building momentum by daring to break the rules. And here's the hidden lesson: in business, disruption often comes from those who can't afford to play by old rules. Imagine the psychological shift. Families weren't just buying soda. They felt like they were getting more for their money, being smart, beating the system. Pepsi gave them that satisfaction. And if you think about your own life, isn't that what people crave? To feel like they're winning, even in small ways. That's why this campaign worked. It wasn't just a product decision, it was the story of empowerment. It changed everything for Pepsi and for the industry. From that moment on, Pepsi was no longer invisible. It had carved out a loyal base and started building the foundation of an identity distinct from Coca-Cola. The revival showed that brands can rise from the ashes, even after being labeled failures. And if you want to see how these turning points can be engineered and how to apply them to your own journey, that's exactly what my exclusive guide breaks down, step by step. The link's in the description. Because the truth is, reinvention isn't luck. It's strategy, the rivalry. With Coca-Cola with momentum back on its side, Pepsi knew it couldn't just be the cheaper soda. To survive long-term, it needed identity. So they made a bold decision. Instead of chasing Coca-Cola's image of tradition and comfort, Pepsi would become the face of youth, boldness, and rebellion. No one saw it coming, but this shift would ignite one of the most legendary rivalries in business history. Coca-Cola represented the past, Pepsi decided to represent the future. The strategy was simple but dangerous: attack the giant head-on. Pepsi's ads didn't whisper, they shouted. They positioned Coke as old-fashioned, while Pepsi was portrayed as modern, energetic, and exciting. What really happened was that Pepsi flipped the script. Instead of being intimidated by Coca-Cola's dominance, they used it as fuel. Every Pepsi campaign was designed to spark comparison, to force people to ask, why drink Coke when Pepsi gives you more? The shocking story came alive in the 1960s with the launch of the Pepsi Generation campaign. This wasn't just marketing, it was cultural branding. Pepsi aligned itself with a rising generation who rejected the old rules and wanted something fresh. Suddenly, Pepsi wasn't just a drink, it was a lifestyle, a badge of belonging to the young, the restless, the ambitious. You won't believe this, but teenagers and young adults across America proudly chose Pepsi to signal who they were, and it didn't stop there. In the 1970s and beyond, Pepsi doubled down on this rebellious image. Their ads featured music, energy, celebrities, and trends. Coca-Cola, with its traditional jingles and sentimental messaging, started to look like the drink of your parents, while Pepsi became the drink of your future. The hidden lesson is clear: in a world of competition, don't always fight on their battlefield. Redefine the game so they're forced to play on yours. This rivalry even turned into direct taste tests known as the Pepsi Challenge, daring consumers to compare the two side by side. And what really happened shocked the world. Many people shows Pepsi, it wasn't just about flavor, it was about perception. Pepsi gave people the feeling of making a bold choice, of not following the crowd. That emotional spark mattered more than the product itself. It almost didn't work at first, but the persistence to keep pushing the campaign paid off massively. By the end of the 20th century, Pepsi had carved out a permanent place in global culture. It was no longer the shadow of Coca-Cola, but a symbol in its own right. And here's where you can learn something powerful: don't be afraid to take on giants. Whether in business or in life, sometimes your biggest strength is your ability to stand out, not fit in. If Coke was tradition, Pepsi had become disruption, and this rivalry would fuel the brand's path into a global empire. From bankruptcy to global empire, from the ashes of failure, Pepsi didn't just survive, it thrived. The brand that once sat on the edge of extinction became the core of a vast empire. The secret behind it wasn't just soda anymore. PepsiCo began acquiring snack and beverage brands, creating a diversified portfolio that reached every corner of the grocery store. What really happened is that Pepsi stopped being just a drink and became an ecosystem. Chips, juices, sports drinks. Pepsi was no longer a survivor, it was a dominator. The expansion didn't stop at products. Pepsi's boldness pushed it far beyond American borders. By the late 20th century, Pepsi was in over 200 countries, competing not just with Coke, but with every brand in the food and beverage industry. You won't believe this, but in some countries, Pepsi became more than just a drink. It became a cultural icon. From Moscow to Mumbai, kids in jeans and sneakers were sipping Pepsi, embracing the modern identity it sold. Financially, the transformation is staggering. Today, PepsiCo generates over $70 billion annually. Think about that for a second. From Caleb Bradham's wooden pharmacy counter to boardrooms that influence the global economy, the truth revealed here is that the empire was not built on luck. It was built on reinvention, on strategy, and on the willingness to embrace failure before rising again. Pepsi's story isn't just about soda, it's about resilience turned into billions. But let's not forget the human side. Caleb Bradham himself never lived to see this empire. His bankruptcy could have been the final chapter. And yet, what really happened is that others carried his idea forward, shaping it into something beyond his imagination. That's the hidden lesson for anyone listening: your dream may outlive you. What you start today could grow into something far bigger than you ever expected. It almost didn't work, but persistence gave it a second life. And here's where you come in. Watching this story, you might feel the same pull Caleb did, the desire to build something that lasts, even if the world doesn't believe in you. Yet, that feeling is the beginning of every empire. The shocking story of Pepsi is proof that failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of the journey. And if you've made it this far, you already know you're not here just to watch. You're here because deep down, you believe you can build too. That's why I created the exclusive guide I've mentioned throughout this story, a collection of lessons from the world's most powerful empires, including the hidden strategies that no one tells you about. The link is right there in the description. Take it, dive in, and don't just be inspired by Pepsi's story. Start writing your own. Because the empire you dream of, it could begin today. And before you leave, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. More shocking stories like this are coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. So, what does the Pepsi story really teach us? That failure isn't the end, it's part of the process. Caleb Bradham lost everything, yet the brand he created rose higher than he ever imagined. The truth revealed is that sometimes the seeds of success are planted in the ashes of defeat. And if Pepsi could go from bankruptcy to billions, what's stopping you from building your own empire? Now ask yourself, where in your life have you faced setbacks that felt final? What idea have you abandoned because it seemed impossible? Could that failure actually be the foundation of your next breakthrough? These aren't just Pepsi's questions, they're yours. And your answer could change everything. Here's the hidden lesson. Success doesn't belong only to billion-dollar corporations. It belongs to anyone willing to persist, to reinvent, to fight for their vision even when the odds are stacked against them. That includes you. Don't just watch this story and move on. Take it as proof that your vision, your dream, can survive and thrive. And if you're ready to take the next step, that's exactly why I created the exclusive guide I mentioned earlier. Inside, you'll find the strategies and lessons drawn from the world's greatest empires, practical insights you can start applying today. The link is right there in the description. Don't just be inspired by this story, use it. Because your empire won't build itself. So, what's your next move? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your vision, your dream, and before you go, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. More shocking stories like this are on the way, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. This was the untold Pepsi story, from bankruptcy to billions. Now it's time to start writing your own. What if I told you that one of the world's most powerful empires didn't start in a skyscraper, but in the backroom of a small-town pharmacy? You won't believe this. Pepsi, the global giant worth billions today, was once nothing more than a drink mixed by a young pharmacist named Caleb Bradham. No investors, no marketing team, not even a plan. Just a man, some sugar, and a dream. The shocking story, he built it up and then lost everything. This isn't the glossy success story you've heard before. The truth revealed is that Pepsi went bankrupt, was written off as a failure, and nearly disappeared forever. Coca-Cola even had the chance to buy it and rejected it. What really happened in those years is the part no one tells you. It almost didn't work, and yet somehow it transformed into one of the boldest comebacks in business history. From ashes to empire, that's the Pepsi story you were never told, and here's why you need to stay until the end. Hidden inside this story are lessons you can apply to your own life. Because this isn't just about soda, it's about resilience, reinvention, and how even when the world counts you out, your idea might still rise. If Caleb's vision, nearly destroyed by war and failure, could grow into a $70 billion empire, imagine what yours could become. That's not just history, that's a roadmap. Before we dive in, I've put together something special, an exclusive guide with the most powerful lessons from the world's greatest empires, strategies that go far deeper than what I can cover. Here, the link's right in the description. It's the perfect companion to this journey. So grab it if you want to take these insights and actually apply them to your own story. Now, let's rewind the clock and uncover how Pepsi went from bankruptcy to billions. The humble beginnings of Caleb Bradham. Caleb Bradham wasn't born into wealth, fame, or power. He was just a young man in small-town North Carolina in the late 1800s, where opportunities were scarce and most people lived paycheck to paycheck. But Caleb had something that separated him from the rest, an obsession with chemistry and medicine. He studied tirelessly, convinced that knowledge could be his ticket out of mediocrity. Before we dive deeper, I've put together an exclusive guide with 10 lessons from the world's most powerful empires. Link in the description. It's the perfect companion to this story. Now, let's step into the life of the man who would create one of the most iconic brands on earth. By profession, Caleb was a pharmacist. He worked long hours mixing compounds, studying human health, and watching closely as townsfolk came in and out of his small pharmacy. Back then, pharmacies weren't just for medicine, they were community hubs, places where people gathered not only for remedies, but also for ideas and conversation. Caleb realized something powerful here. If you could solve people's everyday problems, they'd never forget you. That idea, though simple, was one of the hidden lessons behind his future empire. It was in this modest environment, surrounded by glass jars, old wooden counters, and the constant smell of medicine, that Caleb's curiosity took a different turn. He wasn't just trying to cure illnesses, he wanted to create something refreshing, energizing, and enjoyable. Something that could make people feel better instantly. This thought haunted him late at night when others were sleeping and drove him to experiment with different flavors and formulas. The shocking story is that his first big idea didn't even come from chasing money, but from chasing a solution. One evening, in the backroom of his pharmacy, Caleb began experimenting with a mix of carbonated water, sugar, and natural ingredients. The result was a drink unlike anything the locals had ever tasted: sweet, fizzy, and oddly energizing. At first, he simply called it Brad's drink. Not exactly the billion-dollar branding you'd expect, right? But you won't believe this. People started lining up at his counter, not for prescriptions, but for a glass of his new creation. What really happened is that Caleb stumbled into the business of happiness. Brad's drink quickly became the talk of the town. In a time when life was tough, with long days in fields or factories, his drink offered a small escape. It almost didn't work in the beginning. The formula wasn't perfect, and Caleb doubted himself constantly. But here's the secret behind it. He kept refining, kept testing, and most importantly, kept serving his community. People didn't just taste a beverage, they tasted his persistence. His dream poured into every glass. That connection was priceless. Imagine this. A young man with no investors, no marketing team, no fancy lab, just a wooden counter, a few glass bottles, and determination. Yet he created something that sparked joy in the lives of ordinary people. That's the hidden lesson you can apply too. You don't need millions to start, just the courage to solve one small problem consistently. Caleb Bradham's humble beginnings weren't about luck, they were about vision. And this was only the beginning of a story that would change everything. The birth of Pepsi-Cola by 1898. Caleb knew Brad's drink couldn't remain just a local curiosity. He needed a name with power, something that sounded bigger than his pharmacy and carried a promise. That's when inspiration struck. He rebranded his creation as Pepsi-Cola. The name came from pepsin, an enzyme linked to digestion, and from the cola nut, known for its stimulating properties. This wasn't just a drink anymore, it was positioned as a solution, a modern remedy for tired bodies and weary souls. The truth revealed is that Caleb wasn't selling soda. He was selling energy, health, and hope. The branding shift changed everything. Brad's drink sounded homemade, temporary, forgettable. Pepsi-Cola sounded scientific, futuristic, like something you'd trust to improve your life. Caleb printed labels, stamped the name on bottles, and soon, customers were spreading the word. No one saw it coming, but his tiny town experiment was now turning into a recognizable brand. People didn't just sip Pepsi, they believed in it, and that belief was more valuable than any ingredient in the formula. What really happened next shows Caleb's genius. He leaned into psychology. By connecting the drink to digestion, he made it feel like a healthier alternative. Remember, this was an era when Coca-Cola was still defining itself too. Caleb's move was subtle but smart. Instead of competing on sweetness alone, he positioned Pepsi as the better-for-you option. It's a hidden lesson in business. Sometimes success isn't about being the first, but about being the one that feels safer, smarter, or more aspirational. Here's where it gets fascinating. Caleb wasn't just mixing ingredients, he was laying the foundations of marketing strategy. He understood something that even today entrepreneurs often miss. People don't just buy products, they buy stories, and his story was about health, vitality, and trust. If you're listening closely, this is where the first empire-building strategy shows up. And to dive deeper into these strategies, I've put together that exclusive guide I mentioned earlier, packed with lessons from the world's greatest business empires. Links in the description if you want to explore it fully. But back then, Caleb wasn't thinking about guides or global domination. He was thinking about bottles. How to get Pepsi-Cola into more hands, more homes, more towns. Each bottle became a little ambassador of his dream, spreading far beyond the wooden counter where it was first poured. Every pop of a cap, every fizzing sound, reminded people of the man who believed in creating something different. That's how revolutions in business start. Quietly, one choice at a time. By the turn of the century, Pepsi-Cola was no longer just a local drink, it was becoming a regional success. Competing brands started to notice. Coca-Cola, with its larger reach, was already circling, but Caleb didn't flinch. He had the energy of an underdog, and underdogs play differently. They take risks, they break rules, they bet on guts when resources are scarce. Caleb was about to learn, though, that building an empire is never a straight line. The stage was set for both triumph and tragedy. Early popularity and first expansion moment. Pepsi-Cola hit the shelves. Something unexpected happened. Demand exploded. Word of mouth spread faster than Caleb ever imagined. People weren't just drinking Pepsi, they were craving it. In towns where life was monotonous and exhausting, a bottle of Pepsi-Cola became a small luxury. You won't believe this, but within just a few years, his pharmacy drink had transformed into a regional phenomenon. No longer just a refreshing sip, Pepsi had become a symbol of something new. Energy, optimism, and a break from the ordinary. But popularity alone doesn't build an empire. Caleb knew he needed to scale. He began setting up bottling plants, small at first, but ambitious in vision. These plans were his ticket to multiplying production, to taking Pepsi-Cola beyond the limits of his pharmacy walls. Each new machine, each new worker filling bottles, was proof that his idea was no longer just a dream. It was a business. And the truth revealed here is simple. Growth requires infrastructure. Even when it feels risky to invest, for the first time, Pepsi-Cola stepped into the ring against Coca-Cola. It was David versus Goliath. Coca-Cola already had a wider reach, but Pepsi carried the hunger of the underdog. No one saw it coming, but customers started to compare the two, sparking a rivalry that would define the beverage industry for more than a century. Imagine being Caleb, a small-town pharmacist, suddenly going head-to-head with one of the fastest-growing companies in America. This changed everything for him. Pepsi was no longer just a drink, it was now a challenger. The shocking story here is that Caleb didn't shy away from competition. Instead, he leaned in. He marketed Pepsi not as an imitation, but as a refreshing alternative. This wasn't about copying. It was about daring to exist in the same space, and that courage made people pay attention. It almost didn't work. Resources were thin, and Coca-Cola had deeper pockets, but Caleb's persistence kept Pepsi alive. That's the hidden lesson. Don't wait until you're ready. Step into the fight when the world least expects it. Expansion also meant creating a culture around Pepsi. Caleb ensured that every bottle carried consistency, reliability, and taste. He understood something many entrepreneurs forget: scaling doesn't mean losing your soul. Each Pepsi bottle carried the same spirit as the very first one mixed in his pharmacy. It's the same principle you can apply to your own projects. As you grow, make sure every step reflects the vision that started it all. That's how trust is built, one customer at a time. By the mid-1910s, Pepsi was on the rise. The factories were buzzing, bottles were shipping out faster than ever, and the brand was carving out real space in the market. For Caleb, this was the validation of every sleepless night, every failed experiment, every ounce of persistence. What really happened was bigger than just selling a drink. He was building momentum. But just as success seemed unstoppable, a storm was brewing on the horizon, and soon, that storm would test everything he had built. Crisis and bankruptcy. Just when Pepsi seemed unstoppable, the world shifted. World War I erupted, and with it came chaos that no one saw coming. The war didn't just rewrite political maps, it rewrote economies. For Pepsi, the biggest blow came in the form of sugar. Prices skyrocketed overnight, multiplying several times over. What really happened wasn't Caleb's failure of vision, it was a global crisis he couldn't control. And yet, it would drag him and his empire to the edge of collapse. Sugar was the lifeblood of Pepsi. Without it, the formula couldn't exist. Every bottle depended on it. But as the war dragged on, suppliers raised prices so high that even successful companies were struggling to survive. Coca-Cola, with deeper resources, managed to endure. Caleb, on the other hand, found himself trapped. Imagine building your dream for decades, only to watch your single most important ingredient slip out of reach. It was devastating, and the shocking story is how quickly everything unraveled. At first, Caleb tried to hold on. He borrowed, negotiated, cut costs, even gambled on sugar contracts, hoping prices would stabilize. But it almost didn't work. In fact, it made things worse. The hidden lesson here is brutal. Sometimes, even hard work and persistence can't outpace external forces. No matter how passionate you are, timing and market realities play their role. And Caleb, the pharmacist who once created joy from a wooden counter, now faced numbers that refused to add up. By 1923, the impossible happened. Pepsi went bankrupt. Caleb Bradham, the visionary who had turned Brad's drink into Pepsi-Cola, lost everything. Factories shut down, workers lost jobs, and creditors circled like vultures. The empire he had dreamed of was gone, swallowed by a storm of economics and war. The truth revealed is this: success doesn't always fail with a whisper. Sometimes it crashes like thunder, sudden and unforgiving. Caleb, once celebrated, now stood with nothing. Think about the weight of that moment. One day, your name is on every bottle, your drink in every hand, and the next, it's over. The brand that once promised energy and health was now stamped with failure. It could have ended here. Most people would have walked away, accepted defeat, and let their creation die. But destiny had other plans for Pepsi. Even if Caleb would never see them realized, his loss would become someone else's opportunity. And here's where you can take something powerful for yourself. Failure isn't always the end. Sometimes it's the test that strips everything away, leaving only the lesson. Caleb's downfall is a warning, but also a map. And if you want to dive deeper into how these moments of crisis actually hold the seeds of reinvention, that's exactly what I break down step by step in the exclusive guide linked below. Learn from this mistake. Don't let your empire collapse. Before you're prepared to face the storm, a brand on the brink of disappearing to Caleb's bankruptcy, Pepsi was left in limbo, a brand without a leader, a drink without a champion. Investors circled it like scavengers, picking apart what little remained. The once promising empire was now reduced to scraps. Over the next few years, Pepsi was sold multiple times, each at prices so low they felt insulting compared to the dream it once carried. You won't believe this. The drink that had once inspired lines outside Caleb's pharmacy was now dismissed as a failed experiment. In boardrooms and among distributors, the name Pepsi became almost a joke. Competing brands gained ground, especially Coca-Cola, which was surging ahead with aggressive expansion. Pepsi, meanwhile, was stumbling from one owner to the next, without a clear strategy or vision. The shocking story is that even the industry itself began to treat Pepsi as if it had no future. It wasn't just a struggling company. It was a brand marked with failure, a cautionary tale whispered among entrepreneurs. At one point, Coca-Cola was offered the chance to buy Pepsi outright. Think about that. Coke could have eliminated its greatest rival before the rivalry even began. But what really happened is astonishing. Coca-Cola rejected the offer, believing Pepsi wasn't worth saving. No one saw it coming, but that single decision would define the future of the soft drink industry. By dismissing Pepsi, Coke unknowingly left the door open for a comeback story that would change everything. This period was brutal. Bottlers refused to take risks, advertising campaigns barely existed, and public trust was almost gone. Pepsi was clinging to survival by a thread, often on the verge of disappearing completely. It could have ended here, the brand buried in History remembered only as Caleb Bradham's failed dream. And yet, the hidden lesson is this. Sometimes, the darkest moments prepare the stage for reinvention. The lower you fall, the more room there is to rise. For everyday people watching this, the lesson is crystal clear. There will be times when your ideas, your projects, even your identity feel unwanted, dismissed, or ridiculed, but that doesn't mean the story is over. Like Pepsi, your vision might simply be waiting for the right person, the right timing, or the right strategy to bring it back to life. The truth revealed is that failure is never final until you stop trying, or until someone else sees value where others don't. Pepsi's survival during these years wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. Each time it was sold, each time someone decided not to shut it down completely, the brand was given another tiny chance at life. And here's where we, as modern dreamers, can take a page from history. Persistence isn't always loud, sometimes. It's quiet endurance, the refusal to vanish. Pepsi was on the brink of disappearing forever, but destiny wasn't done with it yet. The stage was set for a rebirth no one expected.